Okay. Hello, friends. Chris McMillan here, and I'm here with John Vibes, who has just written a book. It's called Paper Squares and Purple Stars, My Life as a Rave Outlaw. Now, John, your credentials go way back. You've written 5 books. Is this your 5th book? You co-wrote three books with Derek Bros, and it seems like you've got 2 more that you've written yourself, and this is your latest one. Am I right, or am I missing something?
Yeah, no, that's correct. My first book actually came out before I started working with Derek. And after I wrote my first book, I started putting articles out on the internet. Prior to my first book, I actually didn't really, the way I did activism was very different. And that's kind of what the new book is about. I didn't actually start doing this whole public speaking and writing thing, or at least blogging journalism, until after my first book was already out, and I was trying to find ways to kind of get it out there, because most people know when you publish a book, it usually just sits there because nobody knows about it. You got to go and try to find out, ways to get it to people. And one of the ways was I started writing articles, and that is how I kind of ended up linking with Derek Bros. We knew some mutual friends and stuff too. But our ideas were just so similar and unique too, because a lot of people who were into the anarchism side of things were just very 5 sense world oriented, not interested in looking in any kind of spiritual or weird, trippy kind of things, just everything cold, hard, rational. Or on the other side of things, you have the spiritual oriented people who just think that they're going to solve the world's problems by meditating all day or something like that, and they don't want to look at the negative things that are actually happening that are really important. So that was kind of like the nexus that kind of brought us together, where we're like, somebody out there really needs to be pushing it, the message, bringing those 2 groups together and bringing those 2 messages together, and presenting it in a way that isn't, just crazy and hostile and divisive like a lot of the activism out there is. And we figured, why not work together on it? And it turned out really well. I'm really proud of the work that we did together, and we'll probably do more together in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I got to give you credit. Before I read the 3 books that you guys wrote together, we've got Manifesto of the Free Humans, Finding Freedom in an Age of Confusion, and The Conscious Resistance, Reflections on Anarchy and Spirituality. Before I read those books, I always considered myself an atheist. But then, you guys made a really good point. We don't know what there isn't, and so it kind of veered me back to the agnostic point of view, where it's true, we're never going to know in our lives. We're never going to know this, so may as well just kind of sit on the fence about it. Whereas atheism in itself is a religion. There is no God, but okay, how do we know there isn't one? I'm being, when you combine that with my recent studies of objectivism, and I'm thinking, being agnostic does make more sense. And that seed was planted from the books that you guys wrote together. So it was, they were very good. I enjoyed them very much.
That's really cool, man. That's awesome to hear. And that's really where I stand too. As we laid out in the book, our position is explorative agnosticism, which is like, why not consider things? Why not consider what might be, even if it is completely outlandish? And you might not have to believe in it. You might not have to subscribe in it. And you definitely shouldn't argue with people about it, because that's totally ridiculous to get mad about something that nobody can prove anyway. And that's why religion is just one of the easiest things to start arguments, because there's no answer to any of it. You just argue till no end, until there are wars, So I think if we all adapted this perspective, where like, we can't prove what happens when we die or where we came from anyway, so why not, let's just have some cool conversations about it and think about what might be, and maybe that'll help us get to some kind of discoveries that'll explain a fraction of it. We'll probably never know the whole picture, but either way, I just think that's a much more healthy way of looking at things. And personally, since I have taken that perspective, those kind of conversations have been a lot more enriching and positive when I encounter people, even if they have a certain set mindset. I don't have to, come at them a certain way. And as you said, with the atheism as a religion thing, um, atheism just becomes one more camp in the argument. And it's like, why do you have to have the argument? Just have a conversation about it, because nothing can be proven anyway. Atheists, again, are trying to prove, some of them, of course there are atheist agnostics, I guess, who think, lean towards that way, but admit that we don't know anything.
So in the meantime, in the pursuit for spiritual truth, what can we do?
Well,
That you can admit.
yeah, well, honestly, I am definitely an advocate of psychedelics, and that is, of course, a big part of my new book. But I think that it's one of them things where it can kind of take you outside of yourself and out of this five sense reality, because there are certain things, and of course people can explain it away. Oh, it's just your mind playing tricks on you. It's just your brain being perturbed in a certain way. But when you have certain experiences, it's like a seeing is believing kind of thing. And as I lay out in the book, it isn't necessarily for everybody, and it's something that people should research before they get into, especially, they shouldn't dive right into it if they have family history of any kind of problems with mental illness and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it can be something that really brings you outside of the programming that we've been in. And I know that was my experience, and that is what is kind of highlighted a lot in the book, my journey through that. Even though I've always had an anti-authoritarian perspective, I started out very nihilistic about it, because, your whole life you're going through public school, you're dealing with adults and everything, and you have no power. And when you realize, like I did at a young age, that it's not right, it's not the right way to be in this world, this domination and being told what to do and all that. I didn't really take well to it. So it gave me this very jaded perspective on the world, where I just thought that there was no hope, and I didn't think that people were good, and it's kind of one of those things where I saw that there could be a different way in this world. Like, I didn't have to my plan was just to party until I died at a young age, but it was the psychedelics that kind of told me, like, yo, don't throw your life away. This earth is worth something, and you can use your time here to actually change it. Now, not everybody has that kind of reaction, but I think a lot of people do. And a lot of people that I've spoken with and have related to, they have kind of had that experience. And of course, that isn't the only way. I think a deep study of all the world's cultures and religions is an important part of that too.
That kind of segues to my next question. Now, I do want to find out, I got some questions about your book, but how did you transition between being a normal guy, you went through the public indoctrination system, and then suddenly you started to realize the bigger picture, that this world that the way we're supposed to think it is not that way at all. Basically, how did you take the metaphorical red pill?
Well, it's kind of a hard thing for me, because I was always getting in trouble, and like I always felt like an outsider of society ever since I was old enough to remember, pretty much. I didn't get along in school, both with the adults and with the other children and stuff. And I was also like a goth kid as a teenager. So I was really into like the anti-establishment kind of stuff, but it was on a very superficial level. I I took to, in those early years, I took to communism and Satanism and stuff like that, because I just thought, oh, that's the opposite of whatever I see as oppressive in this world, you know? But that's just another trap. And it really, I think it was just kind of a perfect storm of things, because as I got out of high school, Google video was just starting to be a thing before YouTube, you know? And I was also always really into aliens and stuff like that. So I always kind of was into like conspiracy stuff a little bit. But then when the internet video started blowing up where they could have full length documentaries on there, I fell deep into that rabbit hole. And that was around the same time I started experimenting with psychedelics. And I would also listen to artists, musicians that I've liked over the years, whether it be Bob Marley or even Tupac, or you know, bands like System of a Down, Rage Against the Machine, even. I was
What
like, wow.
about, did you ever get into Immortal Technique?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. Oh, I loved Immortal Technique, and I saw him live when I was young, and I was really into him too. So then, as I'm watching these videos, I was like, wow, all these people that I respect a lot are talking about all these things I'm researching, and it just at that same weird time in my life, I started putting those ideas together, and that is kind of what started leading me down my path.
Excellent. And when did you write your first book? About how long, once you started to realize things were not the way they are, you started to wake up to these issues. How long? I mean, that's pretty impressive. How long did? What motivated you to start writing in the first place?
It was kind of a weird progression, actually. When I was younger in that whole goth stage and stuff, I wrote a whole bunch of depressing poetry and song lyrics and stuff like that. And that was really my first entrance into writing. And but other than that, that went away for a few years. When I started partying heavy, I wasn't really, you know, getting into that too much. And I got I fell into this whole rave thing where I got this opportunity to start throwing raves, and the cops started coming to our events and giving us trouble. And one night, a couple things led to another, and I got on the mic and I started saying all this crazy stuff about the cops. And people started going crazy. And I was like, man, maybe I have a platform here. So then I started posting some things online here and there, like some of the documentaries I was watching or some, you know, whatever I was researching, and people started to respond to it a little bit. And then this is the definite psychedelic situation that on my path, I had an experience with DMT where I was literally told to write a book. It wasn't like a language thing. It wasn't in a voice. It was just like when I came out of that experience, there was a message in my head that I needed to write a book.
Was this
And
before or after you? I'm assuming here you saw the documentary by Dr. Strassman.
oh yeah, this was after I saw it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, cool.
because I had tried to experiment with DMT on numerous occasions, and like it didn't really work, or I wasn't doing right, or I didn't hold it in long enough, or whatever. But then there was this situation where I was in a person's apartment that essentially made it, and you know, they everything worked out right. I won't give any spoilers because the story is actually in the book, but everything worked out okay. And we were even talking about some of those parts from the book, you know, that day when it was going on. But I had never really thought about writing or anything, and I didn't know what I was going to write about. I just know that I needed to write a book. And over the next 4 years after that, and I think that was 2008, for the 4 years after that, between 2008 and 2012, I started compiling multiple essays together, and that's what ended up being Alchemy of the Timeless Renaissance, which I'm kind of working on a rewrite for, because of course that was my first book. I was really young. I've learned a lot since then just about writing in general. So I think I could just tighten it up and make it a little bit better. So that's kind of one of my next projects. But yeah, then after that, we kind of, me and Derek hooked up and formed and started on the Conscious Resistance series.
Yeah, cool. Um, yeah, so the latest book, it's out. It's for sale. It's on sale at Amazon, and
Yeah.
yeah. So this was going to be my first question.
Nah, it's all good. Yeah, I guess
What's the book about? Yeah, how is this book? How does it? Is it different from your other books? And what inspired this particular book?
this is entirely different from my other ones, because the other ones were just straight kind of academic nonfiction activism kind of uh, books, but this is, I guess, written more like a novel. Um, it, I could have said it was fiction, and people would have just thought, but it, all these events happened aside from the names and dates being changed in some circumstances and composite characters being put together. And there were one or two things that I embellished to make it certain parts a little bit cooler. Like there was one time where a guy asked me if he wanted me to smash up a club owner's car after he ripped us off, and I told him not to. But in the book, I kind of took the liberty of like, what if I had actually just said go ahead, you know?
Yeah,
So there, that's like an example of like one of the little things that I played with. There was another situation where there was an incident with a friend, and I went to go visit him in jail. And there's a scene where I went to go visit him in jail. In real life, he just sent me a letter from jail, but it was just so much better to have a scene where you get to describe prison,
yeah.
so there are certain things like that where it's not entirely nonfiction, but it is a true story about stuff that I lived through, written and told through characters.
Very cool. And was this all in Maryland?
The base is in Maryland, but it actually starts out in Harrisburg, at an island on a party, or an island that a party was on, and it was kind of a historical event, because it was going on for a very long time, and the event that I went to was the last one because somebody ended up dying, and the cops raided and arrested a bunch of people. And that was kind of my entrance into that world in a lot of ways. And then there was another venue in Philadelphia that I was involved with called God's Basement, which was a rave in the basement of a church, deep in the city in Philadelphia. And that, a lot of crazy things happen there. I won't give any spoilers, but and then there are some trips to New York and stuff like that. But the main club that I ran over the East Coast, and the stuff that we did, and that is kind of depicted in the book too.
There are a lot of parallels between your life and mine, John. In fact, I'm myself am writing a book about my days in the past, similar but very different. Just trying to come to terms with who I was, how things were different, what I was thinking at the time. Yeah, I look forward to reading this. I'm sorry I hadn't read it yet. In fact, I thought about
No, it's fine.
Yeah, I thought about postponing our interview, so I could talk to you after I've read it, but that's okay. We can have a follow-up talk about it.
I'm always down for a follow-up. That'd be great.
So you were very busy as well. Apart from all this, I've got here, you're a regular contributor to the Free Thought Project, The Mind Unleashed, True Activist, Truth Theory, and you're one of the organizers for the Free Your Mind conference. Anything else I'm missing there?
Well, I've actually restarted my rave company, Good Vibes Promo, and we've been doing event warehouse parties in Baltimore about every 3 months or so. We might be kind of getting a little bit more active depending on what's going on with that. There's also a video game that's based on the current book that I'm currently writing a script for. And I also write for Crypto Globe too, which is a cryptocurrency website, and I do a little bit of dabbling in the blockchain community, but nothing major. I still consider myself a student in that, and really everybody should, because that stuff is changing so much every
Yeah,
day that you really can't like feel like you know anything in that world.
I know it's overwhelming. What's your most fashionable cryptocurrency these days? Even though I know it could change very quickly.
Well, you know, it's definitely, it's been a rough year for like all of the projects, you know what I mean? Overall, though, Nexus is still a really cool project, and I respect what they're doing and the people involved, where they're trying to send the satellites up into space to shoot down free internet and a blockchain that can't be taken down by the government. And Ravencoin is another interesting one because Patrick Byrne was involved in initially, and there are some interesting use cases for that. Um, and of course, BitTube is very interesting as well. And I've been using the Brave browser, which is connected to Bat, and they pay you to look at ads, and then they pay the whoever's on the website, like the people running the website. Even though Brave has a built-in ad blocker, the websites can still opt in to their native ads that don't track people, and both the viewer and the website who's publishing get paid from the ads, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I I had a Bitcoin years ago. I paid about 34 euros for it. I was living in Europe at the time, and when it at one point it was worth about $400, and somebody hacked into my computer and quote unquote sent it away, to another address. And I should not have let that discourage me at the time, obviously, because it was only worth $400, even though I thought to myself, well, theoretically, I've only lost about 35 euros or dollars. It's about the same anyway. I kind of gave up on cryptocurrency for pretty much, I said, no more experiments in that, but I do regret that.
I had a similar issue because I was like using one of the cheap online wallets because my internet was so bad at home, and because I couldn't run a full node like they needed you to back in the day. And then like I lost maybe like, 2 Bitcoin or something that was worth like under $100. And then I was like, I'll wait until this is more user friendly. Like I continued to research and believe in it. I just didn't invest in it because I was like, I don't have the internet for this, and it is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. John, so is there such a thing as a victimless crime?
I mean, there is in this world, unfortunately, but I don't think that there actually is one. You know what I mean? Like we have victimless criminals and people get arrested for victimless crimes, but I don't think they're actually quote unquote crimes.
Exactly. They're not crimes at all. Um,
Yeah.
the non-aggression principle, if there's no victim, there's no crime. What about, I was interested in what you said, you're still running the raves. I suppose in today's day and age, what's the legality with that? How does that work? Do you have to negotiate with the local officials to get the space? Is it very complicated?
If I wanted to do something on a larger scale, it would be that complicated, and that's why I'm kind of sticking to underground events this time around. We may like try to plan a bigger festival or something like that, and in which case we may have to deal with local officials, but I'd still probably just try to go out into the middle of nowhere, and try to kind of avoid that if possible. Nowadays, it's a lot easier than it was 10 years ago when I was trying to do events then, because just the political climate's a little bit different. everybody is very concerned about the opioid crisis right now, and that is really not going on at raves. There's been all this news in the past 10 years about, the benefits of psychedelics and all these Silicon Valley bros microdosing and everything. And weed is generally legal a lot of places. In Maryland, where I do events, it's medically legal. So the cops can no longer be like, oh, I smell weed, let me into your event. Or so the things are a lot different now just because of the cultural climate, really. There isn't really a big scare about people doing psychedelics right now, unless you are like listening to the most ultra socially conservative talk show or something.
That is very interesting. I'm shocked. I would not. I would have thought it been vice versa. I definitely would have thought that 10 years it would have been more difficult these days. But yeah, good point. Yeah,
Yeah,
very
there was a
interesting.
lot less. I mean, the changed attitude towards cannabis is so huge, because raves get credit for the ecstasy and the acid and all that, and that is there. But most of what people are doing there is just smoking weed, and but the thing that sucks is that is what smells, and that's what's real bulky. That's the hardest thing to hide. So for a long, long time, that was what was getting cops being able to come into parties, that reasonable suspicion from smelling weed. And now cops don't even want to be seen messing with people with weed. The opiates are the big thing that people are really focused on. And of course, cops are going to make weed arrests if they pull people over or something like that.
Yeah.
But when there's a couple hundred people in a building smoking weed, they know that they're going to be on the news tomorrow for shutting down some hippies doing nothing. And I think the attitudes have changed a lot since then.
What are your thoughts about Burning Man?
Unfortunately, I've never been because I've always been too broke. And from what I hear, I've missed the good days. But I can't be one to say. There are some other events that kind of try to replicate what they're doing that are a little bit cheaper and maybe a little bit less overwhelming as far as traffic getting into and stuff like that. And if I were to, go and travel, maybe I'd go to something like that instead. It would be nice to go someday though, just because, but I'd be afraid that I've missed the best days.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that it's kind of become a corporate thing now. It's very controlled. It's not what it used to be, from what I understand. Um, but yeah, the festivals like that are quite fascinating. John, you did a road trip a few years ago, didn't you? I remember I was following you on social media, and I remember you came through Texas and went on to the Southwest. Yeah.
Yeah, it was immediately, well, not immediately, but probably about 6 months after I finished cancer treatment and I got better and everything. And that probably took about a month or so. But we didn't go all the way to the West Coast. We turned around in Vegas because it would take like a whole other month to do California and Oregon and all that. And we couldn't leave the dog home alone for that long. So, well, of course, we left her with the mother-in-law and everything, but she would have missed us for 2 months.
Yeah,
But
I'm
yeah,
always thinking of the next road trip, John.
yeah, we had a great time, and actually, that road trip was paid for by Steam It, by my Steam It posts, and I got the rental car, with Steam It that was converted into Bitcoin through BitPay card, and same with the majority of the hotels too. So that was the cool part about the trip. One of
That is what
the,
agorism is all about. You know what I mean? Cutting out the middleman. That's amazing. So, what's next for you? You're getting the book out, and what about? Are you still doing the articles? Any festivals? Any public appearances? Anything like that coming up? What's coming up for you?
No public appearances right now. I have a couple of events coming up though, that like I said, our events here in Baltimore. I have one on October 11th that we're doing that I'll probably be putting out some promotion for this week. And then we'll have another one in December. I'm still writing my articles, and I'm also working on the script for the video game that'll be out relatively soon. And I'm working on some fiction ideas also, because I think that's going to be my next direction. I have a couple of cool ideas about, you know, what I can do with that. And I had a lot of fun with the last book, just the whole characters and plot and kind of doing it that way. And I've also found that it's easier to hook more people into a story like that and subtly kind of educate them with whatever ideas and make it a little bit more entertaining for them. So I think that is the next direction that I'm going to go.
That's cool, man. I think it's great what you're doing. The Free Your Mind conference, when does that go on and where?
That's kind of up in the air at this point. We haven't had one for about 2 years now, because of some like logistical and financial and just behind the scenes issues and stuff like that. But we're still unsure of what the future is going to be for that, because it's been out for so long, and everybody that was involved just kind of went in different directions as far as everybody's busy with their own projects and stuff now. But I would still like to do a similar event in the future. I've been talking with, you know, one of my former partners with that, Bob Tuskin, and I'm talking with Derek about a event as well. So, and I've even been talking to a couple people about a specifically a conference specifically for psychedelics and stuff. So I think I might try to focus on more different event partnerships and projects and stuff like that, instead of trying to kind of resurrect Free Your Mind after so many years out of the loop.
I think the next freedom-oriented conference, is it going to be the one in Philadelphia organized by Mark Passio in September? Yeah, I think that one's, I believe it's toward the end of September.
Yeah, that's actually not too far from.
I was at Red Pill.
Yeah, there's a lot of great
Hartford.
people speaking there.
Yeah, I was at Red Pill in Hartford just in June, and that was my first conference on that. And yeah, once you get a taste of it, meeting like-minded people is just euphoric, you know, because we're all spread out. People who know that, you know, have a better idea of the bigger picture of things that are actually going on geopolitically. You read the news, you call BS, whereas most people would read the news and they believe it. And that's just the beginning. You know, we're geographically all very isolated. So these conferences are very important. The work that you're doing, things like all the, you know, everything that you're working on is very important to get through to people and just try to live a free, productive life. So yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's very isolating to kind of be interested in this kind of stuff. And so, you know, to be able to meet out there in person and stuff like that, it can really make a big difference.
Well, I'll bring this full circle, John. Do you want to do any plugins? Where can people get most importantly, where can people get your new book and anything else you want to add from there on?
Yeah, so the new book, you could get to the Amazon link through raveoutlaw.com and raveoutlaw.com. And also there are links to everything else that I have coming up. In the next week, it'll have some of my events, but it doesn't right now. My other books are also on there, as are the sites that I currently write for.
Excellent. John, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. And I'll stop recording here now, but I want to talk to you how maybe I could get my hands on your book as well.
Yeah, I could send you a copy, man.
All right, John, thank you very much.
Yeah, send me your address and I'll send you a copy.
All right, cool.